Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, my name is Cisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast, the Elder Edition. I want to thank all our followers, our subscribers, our listeners for sharing this message of healing, of hope, of love to our culture, rebuilding, and just continuing on in a good way. You know, I want to ask everyone to take a little bit of time to breathe and to think about and honor, the four directions in a good way. So I want you to face the east and think about all the men in your life. Your grandfather, your dad, your sons, your brothers, your homies, the kids in the community. Think about them. Think about what they offer to the community, what they offer to our families. And all our male ancestors that went on, we want to think about them. And then we want to face to the west. And we want to think about that spectrum from the east to the west. All those don't fit perfectly in the men spectrum all the way over to the women. We have relatives in between. We want to remember them and we want to honor them at the same way. And as we get to the west, we want to think about all the women in our life, our grandmothers, our moms, our aunties, our daughters, our nieces, the women that we work with, the women that we know in our community. We want to think about them and bring in their teachings. We want to think about what they bring to the community. Our female relatives that left, that we want to think about them as well. We want to make sure we acknowledge their energy. And then we want to turn to the north and think about our elders, our ancestors, those that lived before us, those that struggled, those that dreamed that we would do what we're doing right now. We want to acknowledge them and think about them. And all our elders in our community. It's fall time now. It's getting cold. We want to think about them. They have enough food, that they're warm, that they're taken care of. We want to acknowledge them. We want to acknowledge what they did, for us, despite how we act sometimes. We want to think about them. And then we want to turn around and face the South, the future generations, our children, the babies, the ones that are not even here yet. We want to think about them, just like our parents thought about us before we were here. Our grandparents prayed about us before we were here. We want to take the time to do that. We want time to think about them and bring them in and think about them when we do our work. When we talk about love, we talk about unity, community, all those things. We want to remember them. And then we want to look to the sky, to the sun for the warmth, the love. Even when it's cloudy, it's still there, acknowledging us, guiding us, doing things to help us. We want to acknowledge that sun. And then we want to touch Mother Earth, don't unseen. Think about the beauty of life, the beauty of the plants, the food that we eat, the corn, all those different things that we need, water that she provides for us, that we take care of her. It's a crisis right now. They call it climate change, but it's something we need to think about. We want to acknowledge her and do our best to take care of her in that way. And then, of course, the center, the creator, we don't know, the great mystery, whatever you refer to the creator, we should acknowledge the power, the energy of life. From the moment we were born, that spark of life, we want to acknowledge that. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of time of your day to acknowledge that. I want to encourage some of the listeners, in the beginning of your day, think about that. Just take a moment to think about all life. You're going to appreciate life that much more if you just take a little bit of time to acknowledge your life that way. So again, I want to thank you. We have a special guest here. I've known about her for a long time, didn't actually meet her nor have conversations with her too much later, but her teachings precede her in a way, so I want to acknowledge her. And her name is Citlali. I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself. And Citlali, thank you for joining us today. And I want you to share a little bit about yourself, your family, your background, and your journey up to this point.
Thank you, Cisco. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. No toca Citlali Arvizu. My name is Citlali Arvizu, and I'm the daughter of Lázaro Arvizu and Virginia Carmelo. And they are students of Maestro Florencio Yescas. And I became a danzante from the time I was born. And my father came from Mexico when he was a young man, a teenager. He came here to the United States. And my mother also learned from his maestro at the same time. And so they formed a family and as danzantes. And so my generation is what we call like the first generation here in the United States, practicing danza azteca. And from my mother's side, I'm also California Mission Indian, and I acknowledge that ancestry as well. And it plays a big part in the path that my life has taken. Of course, the teachings, the tradition, and my awareness as an Indigenous person as well. My parents split ways when I was a teenager, and they both carried their own círculos, their own circles of teaching the tradition. From that point forward, I started leading the group with my mother. And it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey. I at this point now, we've had many cycles, many fluctuations over the years of the group and the people, the individuals that have been students. And I still consider myself a student in the tradition. And I believe, regardless of many of the things that I've overcome or moved past in my life, many struggles, such as I've lived through violence and substance abuse and, different family dysfunctions and other things. And those things impact you. And yet the tradition and, the ceremonial way of life helped me come back to a centeredness with myself. And I think that's different for every single person, but the way they experience those things. But it's something that I've taught my children. I have 2 daughters. From the time that they were born, they were exposed to the tradition and different ceremonial ways. And I decided at some point, it was a conscious decision to decide whether I wanted them to pick up the tradition, because sometimes it can feel heavy, like it's a big responsibility sometimes to carry it, but they have chosen at this point, they're 13 years old, to continue doing the tradition and dancing. They identify as Native American, Indian, Indigenous women, young ladies. And so I think it's something that's a beautiful thing for them to grab onto. And that's something that I didn't always feel was a good or an easy thing. So that's why I was conflicted in teaching them or having them pick up the tradition. A little bit about my background. I was born and raised here in Southern California. I think at this point, I'm starting to realize that there's a lot of responsibilities in being a teacher, and there's a lot of things that I'm still learning and I'm still becoming aware of. And, I've had to overcome a lot of chronic health issues, and it has impacted the way that I participate in the tradition as well.
So with that, what are the lessons that you have learned from your culture, your family, or life experiences along the way that have helped you heal and develop?
As a child, I saw my first experience with where I consciously chose to be a danzante. And I have always been taught by my teachers that being a danzante means it's not just a dancer, it's a dancer of obligation, of ceremonial obligation, of spiritual obligation. And at 6 years old, I went to Mexico, and they had a ceremony in Tacuba, which is where my father's from, in Mexico City, Mexico. And I remember being a child and just seeing everybody moving, everyone dancing. And I felt, I don't know, I saw everything move in slow motion, and I felt something inside of myself. Even though I was a child, I felt something. And I had already been involved in the tradition, but for some reason it was a different moment. Like I experienced it differently. And I remember it just was so beautiful. and so impacting. And that's what we call, in the tradition, we call it conquista, which means your heart and your spirit is conquered by the beauty of your culture and your traditions. And so I remember I told my father and my mother, I said, I want to dance. When we get back home, I want to dance. And they said, well, you already dance. I said, no, but this time I want to dance for reals. And they ended up, making me a new regalia. And from that point forward, I never ever stopped dancing. As a child, you're small and you kind of jump in and out of the circle or run around. But I never saw an opportunity to dance after that and didn't dance. So I think what I learned as a young child right away was that the teachers all taught that, it was something serious and it was a lifelong commitment. It was something that it wasn't something to take for granted. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't something that you could pick up and then put down whenever you got a whim. It was a commitment. And I didn't really understand, of course, as a child, what that all meant. It took me many, many years to understand. And there was many times that I felt very like a burden, to carry your tradition, to carry your culture. And there's times where you don't want to be straight and narrow, because when you dance and you do those things, you're supposed to be, straight and, of course, sober and trying your best to be the best person you can be. And it's not always like that, right? Life isn't that simple. But I think it did teach me a compass, some kind of a sense of what my values were, even though I didn't understand them at that time, and even, going through questioning, my identity as a person that was born here on the other side of the border, disconnected from, my Mexican Indian roots, in that way of I wasn't even raised speaking Spanish, right? That was something that came later on. And then, I always said, I'm not Indian enough for the Indian people here because I'm part Mexican, and I'm not Mexican enough for the Mexicans because I'm born over here on Pocha, and I had to question that, and sometimes it would make me very angry, especially when I was, a teenager. But I think I was able, with doing the tradition and dancing, what it really does, what I realize is there's some things that can't be spoken about. There's some things that talking doesn't necessarily heal. There's some things that can't be said or understood necessarily. Some people don't even have the capacity to articulate the things that they're struggling with. And it's just inside of you, and so I realize now that there was a lot of what we call now, intergenerational trauma, right? The things that I experienced and sensed had a lot to do with the things that our people have been struggling with for a long time. And I didn't know how to put those things into words, but dancing, hearing the drum, smelling the copal, the music, the movement, the things that we use, the rituals, all of those things gave me a peace. They gave me a focus. And I really believe that, that's what they're there for, for some reason. And I do understand it. I don't, there's a lot of debate nowadays about whether or not, the tradition is actually the tradition, how far back did it go, and all of these things that lead us to question the actual foundation of what we do. But the reality is that these things have been done a certain way for a long time. There's a lot of people that have the conflict of even the Catholicism, the crossover, and the use, and whether or not, even that was something that I had to question. I don't necessarily completely identify as, a religious person, but those things all play a part in who we have become to this day and who we stand as in front of each other. And sometimes, healing from all of those things looks like acceptance, right? Like you said, healing looks very different. It's not just one thing. And so for myself, and I don't speak, of course, for anyone but myself, but that's something that, it's taken it's been a long road of many different personal revelations and working things out with, with a lot of different experiences and a lot of different ceremonies. And sometimes even bad experiences have been teaching experiences for myself. So, at this point in my life, I've come to learn that there's always some aspect of the tradition that can be used. There's always some aspect of ceremony that can be used for, for healing or for centering or for finding your way. So I think, that the focus is, the tradition, but there's so many aspects. There's, the making of the regalia. There's the music. There's, the singing. There's the language. There's the dancing. There's the teaching. There's, so much, really. There's the sharing of the tradition, presenting, there's many, many different aspects. And we all everyone has a role, that they can find. And really what it's about is community, I think. Whether you're an individual or whether you seek to have community, those are both there, whether you want to, whether your journey at the moment is an individual journey or whether you need the community and the support, they're both there for you, and you can take them in either way, because sometimes it's one, very individual, and sometimes you need to give. Like there's that concept of reciprocity is very important in the danza and indigenous thinking. Reciprocity is a big deal. It's one of the main, I would say, the main tenets of the way that we operate. Sometimes you give, sometimes you take, right? And whenever you take, you should give back. And some people, sometimes they don't have anything to give at the moment, but all of those things are things that I've learned, and I think that that's something that became a teaching to me through the tradition. Definitely.
Yeah, there's always the reciprocity that needs to happen. I mean, it goes back to there's that we try to teach in the community. We say, you heal, when you heal, I heal. And in danza or in any ceremonial context, it's a struggle. I participate in the Teocalli Native American Church, and a lot of people there too. They go, but they don't go and bring wood or help or do something. It's like, even if you're going just to support somebody, or even if you're just going, you say, "Oh, I want to experience this." Like, you're taking something just by being there. And if you're going to do that, you want to help out some way. Give a little bit of yourself, because you're taking. And I think a lot of in our society, we're definitely, there's a lot of takers in life. I mean, it's kind of like a part of our society, and I think part of our healing is to break that. If we paid attention to how we impact other people, we'll be more respectful to one another. We'll honor each other more, because honoring comes from, it's not something you expect, but it's something, if you do it, people will do it back, and that's the way I try to be. And that's the way, I hear, you try to be too, and try to teach people when it comes to the ways that they have to leave something behind as they take. It's a two-way street. And a lot of people are still learning that part of the road, still learning those ropes. But, tell me where you see yourself now. You told me, you mentioned earlier you had some health issues, so you participate in a different way. What does that look like? And how do you encourage other people who find themselves, maybe they're doing something danza related or something else in the community, and they can't do what they once did, and I know that's a hard thing, but I've always learned. I always learned that you have to, the hardest part is accepting, this is my new reality, but this is what I give today. I can't go backwards, but I can move forward. And I know you struggle with that.
Yeah, I I think that's been something that I've been in the process of for the last, 2-3 years since I started having chronic health issues, and I was told I couldn't, I could no longer dance. And that was, for myself, it was like earth shattering. It was, and I can understand that, not everybody goes through that, but for myself, it was very much a part of, I hadn't even realized yet, like how much of my identity was tied to that. But, to try to, and not only that, but like I said before, like I gained something, spiritually that was very powerful. It was a very big coping, tool for me to dance. It was the way I connected spiritually. It was the way that I released spiritually. And so coming to terms with the idea that, what does that look like for me in my life? And it's not easy, and there's a lot of days that are harder than others to try to identify what is my role now, and what does this mean to me? And what helped me a lot was refocusing on, okay, what are my intentions? What are my values? I know for a fact that the children, the future generations is important to me, whether they choose to be in danza or not. Whether they choose to be danzantes, I still want them to understand the traditional indigenous thinking and values that were instilled in me. I need them to understand that. So all my children, my nieces and nephews, I focused on them. I focused on teaching them, without dancing, sitting and talking to them, showing them the instruments, teaching them nawat words, showing them how to, use their feathers, showing them what the instruments, what the names were and, the ways they sounded and how to use them. All of those little things that, we tend to overlook maybe, because we're busy doing the actual act of dancing. All of those things are very important. And, the children, they understand things differently. The way that they learn is different. And it's much more, being hands-on with them is a much better tool than, and yes, taking them in. Because when I was young, when I was a child, you learn by doing, right? And I was taught not to really ask questions. We just do, and that's the way we learn, right? And that's like an old school way of teaching. You just do. You sit there. You don't ask too much questions, and you learn by osmosis, right? You're gonna learn that way. But the kids now, they're different. They have a lot of information coming at them in a lot of different ways. And so taking their attention to teach them even to learn how to center themselves enough to be present and to touch things and smell things and see things and ask questions. Those are things that even as with the teens and tweens that I work with, that's something that's that they're not getting exposed to in other parts of, the institutions that they're learning in, that they're supposedly being taught in now. So that's one thing that really helped heal my spirit and gave me a renewed sense of purpose, as far as danza was concerned. And I know, and I can feel good that, regardless of what happens in my future, these children are going to say, like, okay, they understand what these things are and how they can be used for themselves and maybe even for their children and their children's children, so that it's not lost. And I have a direct impact on the children that are related to me, that are my, my children, or whatever other children that are, around me. I share that freely because it's something that's precious to me. So it gave me not only the renewed sense of purpose, but it also made me reignite my passion for the things that I took for granted, right? Like I said, like my understanding of those feathers, my understanding of the regalia and the symbols that we use on those outfits, and why do we do this particular ritual this way, and what does this mean, and how do we say that, what's the name of that dance? All of those things that I took for granted, that just as pure knowledge that I have in me, I was now able to look at it through a different lens And I had always, worked with the kids, but it was just completely different now, because my intention was different, right? My intention was refocused, and I appreciate that now. And I think that's something that we all have to come to terms with at some point, because, even looking at the elders that I see when I go to Mexico, there's women and men that can barely move, and they're dancing, right? They're still moving their feet. They still have on their armas and their vestuario, all their stuff that they're dancing with. And I have admiration for the fact that they're there. But, in danza we say, you're going to keep dancing until you literally can't move anymore, And so I think there's a lot of different facets of the tradition and ceremony and our values, and as Indigenous people and as tribally affiliated people, that we can look at and say, what am I passionate about? Maybe it's about the language. Maybe it's about the symbols and the regalia making, and putting yourself into those things for the purpose of giving back to our community and giving back to our ancestors. Because in reality, the way I see it and the way that I was taught is we do these things in honor of all of our ancestors that struggled to maintain these traditional ways. Even just one symbol, just the fact that we still have it, and what it means to us is a powerful thing, and it all has, I believe, a sacred purpose.
What advice, consejo, do you give to young people, Yalders, and that, because Yalders are in this unique position, where we see our elders' mistakes, and we say, well, next time when it's my turn, I'm not going to do things like, I'm going to do things differently. And, but at the same time, our youth are looking at the mistakes we make. I try to, myself, when I'm around young people that are, especially I'm mentoring, or, I took his nephews or nieces, I try to be positive. I don't always want to complain about things in front of them. I want them to know it's better. It's better with it than without it, despite problems, despite some of the tough elements of what we do. But there is still that love. And what are the really hard lessons that you think that you wish you learned earlier in life when it comes to the ways?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on on what I saw of my elders when they were the age that I'm at now. And I realized that they took, a sharp turn in a direction that really focused on, what we do for what they say, like posterity, what's going to last, And a lot of the people that I saw years ago that were really maybe all over the place when it came to tradition, and maybe they were even critics of certain ritualistic ways or ceremonial ways or of the tradition itself. I see them now, and they were at the point in my life when they started to transition into this, that they really follow tradition now. They really have a deep respect for tradition. And I realize when hearing them talk, they say because it works. There's a reason why we do things the way we do them. There's a reason why we have these certain rituals. There's a reason why we use these certain tools for praying or doing ceremony. There's a reason why, we conduct ourselves in a certain way. All of those things, the protocols, all of those things are there for a reason. It's because they worked. And if we follow them, then we talked about this a little bit amongst ourselves, but we can try all we want to try to keep things very much the same, but it's a living tradition. It has a life of its own. It will always be dynamic and change in some ways, but we try to maintain it as closely as we can to what it should be, or what we've been taught, right? What's been handed down to us. And so to carry that forward, I think, is important, and it's a duty in some ways, because it works for us. It helps us connect to Creator. It helps us connect to ourselves. It helps us connect to our ancestors. It grounds us. And all of those things are important and necessary for us as human beings in order for us to continue being well, with ourselves and with the people around us that love us and that we love. And for us to be good human beings to our community, we need these types of things for us. I feel these are the gifts that have been given to us by our ancestors, and it's what we use. And we can use a lot of different things out there. There's a lot of different things out there that we can use, but I feel that, if we have something here that works, why not use that,
Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close up this episode of the Healing Generations podcast, Yalder edition. I want to thank you, Citlali, for sharing your story. And it's a good inspiration and a lot of good lessons there to learn. I want to thank all our listeners. I really just want to take the opportunity again to ask you to share our podcast, get the message out. And please give us feedback on our Facebook page, Instagram. Just let us know what you think, or maybe a topic we should cover. Palabra.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.